I am DM Zone, this is Gamer's Oasis. Let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the difference between fighting a kobold and a cloud giant. No spoilers though, but high ground really matters. In the prior video, I talked about hit locations. This is actually part 2 of that video. Things got a little complicated when I was trying to incorporate this into that video, and I kind of felt like they were two separate videos that could be standalone by themselves. So in supplement 2, there's a bonus chart per se that, as I said, can be a little bit complicated, especially since it doesn't give you a lot of details in it. It spends several pages talking about hit locations, but then it throws a chart in with a bunch of things that doesn't make sense. Basically, there's a lot of new terms that are thrown in here without context. The simple answer to this is more on the high detail side of things, something that would be closer to a combat simulator, more closely to what people believe reality would be like in combat. Now there's the other side of this, which allows this to be put in the hands of the referee to make a decision, or maybe the players to make a decision. Alright, so let's dive into some of these terms so we can understand what is being said when we look at charts and everything in the book. So there are some abbreviations. There's an A, there's an N, and there's a W. There's lots of these throughout this whole chart. Then there's also some 10s, some 20s, some 40s, and some 80s. Basically, every line and every column has either an abbreviation or a number there, which means something. So let's get into what A is. A is automatic hit. It's an abbreviation for automatic. This hits the head or the body. What this means is that in a hit, you can basically, or several hits, you can cause death before you do the cumulative total hit points that creature has. Okay? Normal hit is a normal hit. You roll on the normal hit location chart. It could hit the head or the body, just like an automatic could, but it's not automatic. And it could hit anything else too, just like the normal charts do. W is a wound area. This is a hit location generally referring to the legs, though I don't see why it couldn't also be like arms if it's like on all four, a pseudopod maybe, fins, tails, wings, something of that. Something that is not going to kill you if you are hit there without doing your full hit points and damage. Now these numbers are not clearly stated, but from what I basically understand, these are percents. So these are percent. I'm going to use red and blue, red being the more deadly, blue being the less deadly. If you look at the chart, there's basically a cascading in that goes down through the middle of it there. Everything to the left would be red, and everything to the right would be blue. That's because all the A's are to the left, which is the automatic hits, and all the W's are to the right, which is the wounds. I hope that makes sense. I'll get more back into that in a second. Again, they don't do a great job of explaining this, so I hope I get this right. Basically, the way I understand it is that there are two height charts. The downward chart is the attacker chart, and the farther down you go, the taller the attacker is. And then the columns to the right are all the defender's height, and the farther to the right you go, the taller the defender is. Okay, so being higher, being attacking from above is better for the attacker, and the attacking from the bottom means you still have maybe a chance to get a wound that could kill, but you're probably going to be hitting the legs, which means you have to basically do the full damage to kill that target. Again, they don't do a great job of explaining this. I'm not saying this is 100% correct. I'm just saying that's what their logic is, if I'm understanding it correctly. I'll get more into how this would all work in just a second. If the attacker is taller than the defender, they're going to have a greater chance to attack them in the head and in the body, which is the automatic hit. If the defender is taller than the attacker, when the attacker attacks, they're going to be more likely to hit in the legs, which means they have to do the full hit points. Now, while one can argue whether or not this is 100% correct or not, that is their general logic. The taller, the higher, the more lengthy the weapon is, the greater chance you have of doing a more critical hit. Now, this is further complicated because there's not a hit location chart, there's 7. But I'm going to leave that in the first video, and if you want to go back and check that out, you can. I'm just going to refer to that as a normal hit. But basically, there are differences between attacking a human and an avian versus an insect or a fish. They have a much greater chance to hit the head depending on the directionality you're attacking from. So this is not necessarily a comparison chart, like you roll a dice and compare it to the chart. No, this is you compare your height versus their height, and then you may have to roll to see what chart you roll on, and then you roll on the attacker's roll. Starting to get into a little bit of like a roll master situation, if that makes sense. So if you were to take a 6 foot tall human that is fighting a 3 foot tall kobold, that gives them, as you can see here, a red 40. And as you can see, they will always be a red 40. Now, what does that red 40 mean? That means that they roll percentile dice. If they roll 40% or less, they automatically hit. That's a head or body. If they roll a 41 or higher, then they roll on the normal chart, which means they still could roll head and body, but it's not automatic. Now, what happens if you roll an automatic? Well, that's not actually understood or stated here that I've seen. So it'd be, I guess, up to the referee to decide if it's the head and or the body. Probably 1 in 6 chance head, 2 through 6 probably body in most situations. Now, what if we did this in reverse? Well, if you had a 3 foot tall kobold attacking a 6 foot tall human, they would be a blue 40. They're on the other side of the N. This means that they would be rolling a chance to hit normal. So if they roll 40 or less, then they hit normal, which means they could hit the head or the body. But if they roll a 41 or higher, then they're going to hit the legs or the wound area, as they say. Okay, so what does it look like if you're on the extreme ends of these charts? They say the failures tend to present themselves at the very end of these charts. So what does it look like? We've talked about humans and kobolds, which is more of a normal size, a thing you expect to fight. But what happens if you take that cloud giant and put it against a human? So let's say a human 6 foot tall. There's no difference really until you get beyond 13 feet. So you have to be 14 foot to have any chance at all to hit anything outside of the wound area, aka the legs. Yes, that means that even a hill giant and a fire giant, without weapons mind you, would not hit any area but the wound area. That's kind of ridiculous. Now, I haven't talked about it so far because we've been talking about kobolds and humans, and the distances between the two are actually fairly close. But weapon length extends your height as the attacker. It only does it up to your starting height. So a kobold would be 3 feet and a human would basically be 6 foot, pushing them to a max height of 6 foot and 12 foot for human. So what this basically means is that the human would always be punching down on the kobold, even with or without a weapon. And the kobold could at best normalize the fight, never quite getting to an automatic hit unless it happened to be a non-human class like a dwarf. Now, as they're capped by their starting height, it also makes certain spells like shrink, or the inverse if there is such a thing, like a growth spell, so much more powerful in this version of the game. That is the only way that a human could do anything but do full hit points to the legs, essentially, or potentially knock prone a giant so they could then attack some other area than the legs. So if you are only ever attacking the wound area, that means you are doing full damage. You're reducing their movement and this type of stuff, potentially. But you're not able to have a chance to do 50% of the damage to kill them. And because they're so tall and they're doing an automatic hit, that means that they only get a chance to hit the head or body, which means that if they do 50% of your damage to your head, you're done. It's basically an auto kill in many ways. Now, outside of my thoughts of how this would work and all of that, I think it's very clear that this was a good, solid attempt to sort of sort out how combat works. I mean, one could easily argue that a boxer with a larger or a longer reach has a greater chance to win a fight than a fighter with shorter reach. Now, there's a lot of other variables. There's strength, there's timing, there's speed, that type of stuff. But for picking on a variable, this might be one of the more important ones. I still think their logic's a little bit wrong. I feel like there should be a lot more shots to the arms and legs. If a person is using that to defend themselves, for example, defensive wounds are a very common thing when you have people in a fight with weapons, because they get stabbed in the arms and hands and this type of stuff. I also feel like if you're attacking from the face or above, you're going to have more of those wounds than if you're attacking from behind and maybe an assassination type of attack or a backstab. And depending on how the defender is built, there could also be wings, tails, and other things like that that get in the way as well. The second thing is, I think legs are not a zero chance to be struck. There is always a chance you could strike someone in the leg. The example I would give is when Frodo Baggins is striking the cave troll. He strikes him in the hand because the positioning of him, even though he is far smaller than the cave troll, and because the cave troll is reaching out to attack Frodo. These two things would not be covered in this fight, as we're calling it, and very well could happen and makes a lot of sense logically. It's also a great narrative tale. I think that these two things I disagree with on this, the first thing being defensive wounds, and the second one being there's not a zero chance, kind of gives the broad strokes of what I would argue against this thing. And trying to dive too much into it right now in this video would be too noodly. To continue on this thing about positioning, let's talk about this more in game matters. Like if you're swinging on from a chandelier and land on the back of an ogre, that has true value. It's also epic and cool. In that same fight I was talking about a second ago against the cave troll, when Legolas jumps onto the back of the cave troll and plunges 2 arrows into the neck head area of that troll to finish off the cave troll, that took all that little damage and ended it with a boom, especially when he fell to the ground. Now, what that scene in the Fellowship of the Ring reminds me of so much is these are how a lot of the fantasy books were wrote back then. You got Fahad and the Grey Mouser, you have Conan the Barbarian, you have, Legolas, Frodo Baggins, Gandalf, these type of things. Many, many more. Plus other genres. They were wrote to be epic. They were wrote to be situational and positional and to use your environment in the fight. Yes, having a longer weapon or being at higher ground gives you some benefit, but it wasn't necessarily all of it. You see, there was no video games back then. There was no movies back then. So a lot of their stuff was told from a storyteller narrative perspective. And that kind of goes to where my position is. So when I talked about this in the first video, I talked about the fact that I feel like the percents are off a little bit. And I would increase the head and body limbs to 50% of the hit point total, having a less chance to break an arm or to have a final blow to your head, giving you a little bit more survivability, but then still having that risk there. And increasing the torso or the body to 80%. I think the same thing can be said about these increments, but being on top of someone probably would drastically change the positioning and change it directly to an automatic hit and not even needing to go to the hit chart. So the above and the below chart kind of goes away in many of these things. I think there's a lot of room for adjustment in this. And I think that if this had been given the time and had been used in other editions, we would have a very good system to build off of. I think the roots of this are solid and are good, but they're just a little bit not quite there. It needs more polish. That's what I would say. Anyways, guys, did I get this one right? Did I get this one wrong? Let me know down in the comments down below what you think. Thank you. Have a good day. Keep rolling those dice. And yes, if you're still watching, I am sick. I apologize. I hope I didn't inconvenience you. Bye.